You didn't resist change because you were lazy. You didn't avoid growth because you lacked discipline. You didn't stay the same because you didn't understand yourself. You stayed the same because change felt like losing who you are. And today, we will explain why change feels like losing yourself, even when you know it would make your life better. Most people think fear of change comes from uncertainty, but that's only the surface. At a deeper psychological level, people resist change because change threatens identity. And identity is not just how you describe yourself. Identity is how your brain predicts the world. From childhood, your mind builds a story about who you are. Not consciously, automatically. This story includes your fears, your habits, your emotional responses, your strengths, and your limitations. Over time, this story becomes familiar, and familiarity feels like safety, even when the story hurts you. This is why people stay in patterns they hate, because those patterns confirm who they believe they are. Human behavior is not driven by logic. It is driven by identity preservation. You don't protect what feels good, you protect what feels like you. This is a core principle in psychology of change. When someone says they want to change, what they usually mean is they want different results, but they don't want a different self. And that's where conflict begins. Because real change does not just alter habits. It alters identity. It changes how you see yourself. It changes how others see you. It changes what feels familiar inside your nervous system, and the brain interprets that as danger. This is why even positive change can trigger anxiety. This is why improvement can feel like loss. This is why growth often feels like grief. When you try to change, you are not just leaving behaviors behind. You are leaving versions of yourself behind. And the brain experiences that as death, not literal death. Psychological death. The death of a familiar identity. This is deeply uncomfortable, because identity gives you orientation. It tells you how to behave, what to expect, what roles you play. When identity starts dissolving, uncertainty increases. And the nervous system does not like uncertainty. This is why people sabotage themselves right before a breakthrough. This is why people feel empty after success. This is why people return to old habits even after therapy. Self-awareness alone does not solve this. In fact, self-awareness can make it worse. Because once you understand your identity, you start defending it intellectually. You say things like, "This is just how I am. This is my personality. This is because of my past. This is my coping mechanism." These explanations sound mature, but psychologically, they act as shields. They protect identity from disruption. The mind confuses explanation with acceptance, and acceptance with permanence. This is how self-awareness turns into stagnation. From a neuroscience perspective, identity is stored through repetition. The limbic system learns what emotional states are familiar. The prefrontal cortex builds narratives to justify them. So when you attempt change, the limbic system reacts first. It signals threat, discomfort, anxiety, resistance, and then the thinking brain creates reasons to stop. This is not weakness. This is how the brain is designed. The brain prioritizes predictability over happiness. Predictability equals survival. Change removes predictability, even if change improves your life. This is why people often say, "I know what I should do, but I can't do it." They are not lying. Their nervous system is vetoing the decision because action threatens identity. Consider someone who has always seen themselves as anxious. Anxiety is familiar. It organizes their world. It explains their behavior. Now imagine that person becoming calm. What happens to their identity? Who are they without anxiety? How do they relate to others? How do they explain their past? Calmness creates a void, and the mind hates voids. So it returns to anxiety, not because anxiety feels good, but because it feels known. This is why healing can feel unsafe. This is why peace can feel boring or empty. This is why people miss their problems. Problems give identity structure. They give meaning. They give direction. Without them, people feel lost. This is rarely talked about in self-improvement psychology. Most content focuses on motivation, but motivation does not address identity loss. You can motivate behavior, but you cannot motivate identity death. Identity has to be grieved. Change requires mourning who you were. Not dramatically, quietly, internally. This is why change feels heavy. You are letting go of the person you used to be good at being, even if that person was suffering. Even if that person was stuck. They were familiar. They were predictable. They were safe. From a behavioral psychology standpoint, habits are not just actions. They are identity confirmation. Every time you repeat a habit, you tell your brain, "This is who I am." Breaking a habit is not just stopping behavior. It is refusing to confirm identity. And that creates internal conflict. The brain asks, "If I'm not this, then who am I?" Most people retreat at this point. Not because change is impossible, but because identity uncertainty feels unbearable. This is where self-sabotage psychology comes in. Self-sabotage is not self-hatred, it is self-protection, protection of identity. When life starts improving, identity feels threatened. So the mind creates chaos to restore familiarity. This is why people ruin good relationships. This is why people abandon progress. This is why people relapse, not because they want pain, but because pain fits the story. Change challenges the story. And stories feel safer than freedom. Freedom has no script. Freedom requires improvisation. And improvisation creates anxiety. This is why people prefer known suffering to unknown peace. Understanding this shifts how you approach change. Change is not about forcing discipline. It is about tolerating identity instability. It is about sitting in the uncomfortable space where the old self no longer fits. But the new self is not formed yet. That space feels empty, unstable, disorienting, but it is necessary. Psychologically, this is called the liminal phase, a transition state, where identity dissolves before reforming. Most people never stay here long enough. They rush back to familiarity. They retreat into old habits. They explain it away with logic. They say they're not ready, but readiness is not a feeling. It is a decision to tolerate discomfort. Neuroscience of habits shows that new identities form after repeated action, not before. You don't feel like a new person and then act differently. You act differently and eventually feel like a new person. Identity follows behavior, not the other way around. This is why waiting to feel ready keeps people stuck. Readiness comes after repetition, confidence comes after evidence, clarity comes after movement. This is the opposite of what most people believe. They think they need to feel like someone new before acting like someone new, but the brain does not work that way. The brain updates identity based on behavior data. When you act differently despite discomfort, the brain slowly recalibrates. It learns, this is who we are now, but that process is slow. And during that time you feel lost. This is why change feels lonely. Even if others support you. Because your old identity dissolves before the new one is integrated. You are between selves. Most people mistake this feeling as a sign they are doing something wrong. But it is actually a sign change is working. If change didn't feel like losing yourself, it wouldn't be real change. It would just be optimization within the same identity. True transformation requires identity loss, not destruction, replacement, and replacement takes time. This is why superficial change rarely lasts, because identity was never addressed. The behavior changed temporarily, but the self stayed the same. Eventually, the self pulls behavior back into alignment. This is why long-term change feels different. It feels slower, heavier, less exciting, but more stable, because identity is being rebuilt. If this video resonates, it's likely because you are standing at that edge, where the old self no longer fits. But the new self feels unfamiliar. That discomfort is not failure, it is transition. And transition is the price of freedom. If you want more psychology that explains human behavior, identity, self-sabotage, and why change feels so hard even when you want it, subscribe to Cognition Vault, because understanding the mind is common. But having the courage to outgrow yourself is rare.